Hello, and welcome to the Handle with Care training for our final cohort in CMS. We'll be talking through what that means and who you guys are. You do have a copy of this PowerPoint to follow through while you're in this Canvas course. And Jessica Jacobs, our trauma specialist, is the CMS contact for this program and will be the one that you will be receiving all of your information from and all of your updates. So we know our kids have a lot of anger triggers, right? And this training is a difficult training just because we do address the trauma that our kids face. So just remember what your happiness trigger is. What is it that puts a smile on your face anytime, anytime? So looking at the ones on here, that hot coffee in the morning, moving your body, that favorite smell, your fur babies, your children, right? Think about what puts a smile on your face. So if you're ever in that kind of downtrodden way, think about that happiness trigger. It's so important to remember them. And again, because this is a difficult training, we have to make sure that we do this content warning and self-care tips, pay attention to your reactions. We are breaking it down into several different parts so you're able to stop, go back to it after you want to. But again, because you guys have a lot of school crises and kids that are traumatized, please take care of yourself as you're doing this training. We have a phenomenal collaboration with our Handle with Care initiative in CMS. It started about 8 years ago, and we are calling this our Handle with Care 3.0 because we've tried numerous times to get this off the ground. And because of our collaboration, that's why we were able to get it off the ground in the 23-24 school year, and with only 14 schools. But our collaboration is with CMS. We have a great team here. Pat's Place, our Child Advocacy Center, and I'll talk about some of their contributions. CMSPD with Deputy Chief Wilson and with Chief Mangum have been phenomenal allies in this program, as well as CMPD and all of our other town polices. So Davidson, Cornelius, Huntersville, Pineville, Matthews, and Mint Hill. And we do have memorandums of understandings or MOUs with all of our town police. We also collaborate really extensively with the Office of Violence Prevention in Mecklenburg County. We are actually working with them and with Atrium Health, the Youth Prevention Violence Conference that's held every year. We also work with trauma and justice partnerships in Mecklenburg County, which includes our crisis intervention team trained officers that do our well checks, as well as our community development, community policing therapists that do go out when there is major crisis and trauma at a site where the police are. And then our recast group, which is our group that works on resiliency and building protective factors and resiliency for all of our people in Mecklenburg County. One of the great things I always talk about when we talk about our Handle with Care initiative is it's starting as a CMS initiative, but it really truly is a Mecklenburg County initiative. We would love all of the charter schools, parochial schools, and private schools to actually do the same thing and come on board with all of our opportunities. I am now going to share with you our rollout of this final cohort, which will be completely rolled out then in August once you guys get your training. So it's our University Division from CMPD, our South Division schools, and our East West schools. So we do have a great finale to all of those schools that are going to be starting in August. So now we're going to get back to our PowerPoints. And one of the things that our accountability department has helped us with, as well as the CMS cabinet, really wanted us to do some baseline surveys and post-data surveys. So that is this baseline survey here. Luckily, we were able to have our accountability department reduce it down to only 12 questions that we really felt would give us kind of a basis of what our district feels where we are as far as trauma-informed education for our kiddos. So you guys will be taking this, and this is also something that you will be doing with your staff prior to doing your short training that you're going to do for them at the beginning of next year. So thinking through what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to talk through things like what is childhood trauma, why all of us really need to be involved and care about the trauma with our kids, talking about some specific data and how trauma happens daily, and then what the solution is really to help kids, and then how you guys are going to take the training that you're taking and then give it to your schools. So we know from major research that has gone on for years and years that across the United States, 60% of our children have been exposed to violence, crime, or abuse. 60%. So when you think we have over 140,000 students in CMS, right? That's, 85%, 85,000 students, 85,000 of our students have been exposed to violence, crime, or abuse. That is huge. So we know we have to support our kids. But you guys know if you've ever done any training on trauma and adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, I hope you all have. These are the different stressful events that can have negative and lasting effects, right? We think about our abuse, all of those DSS referrals that we make, right? Emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical, domestic violence, and those other types of things that we see, our community violence, the bullying and cyberbullying that go on in our schools, any type of death, right, and loss can cause trauma. That abandonment, neglect, separation, even separation of our parents, divorce of our parents, natural disasters, which we've been seeing a lot of, accidents. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of car accidents with our students in CMS, and then everything else that we see in the news regarding terrorism and war are still impacting our kids and our students as well. And then when we think of that chronic trauma and that chronic stress, ongoing poverty, ongoing racism, if someone has invasive medical procedures or chronic illnesses, family members with substance abuse or mental health issues, and then the community trauma we see. This is not an all exhaustive list, but these are a lot of the ones that we see with our students in CMS. So now I'm going to share a video with you about what we see. And I want you guys to take a look at this video and see if you see any of your kids in this or any of your peers. So I'm going to go ahead and change screens and share this video. So I hope with that you did see some of your students in there, some of our peers, our colleagues. And that's one of the things I really like about this short video is it's not just the kids that are experiencing trauma. We may or may never know what's going on with our colleagues and our peers. So it's really, really important to make sure that we take care of each other, right? And then the things that you're going to be learning in this course are really universal things to use for everybody. Because again, we never know what our folks come with. So it happens here. We know we make a lot of child protective service referrals for domestic violence. And if you look at this number, I want you to think about your own school, that 1 in 15 US children are exposed to domestic violence in a year. How many kids do you have in your school? Like, how many do you have in your school? Do you have 1,000 kids? So how many is that? If you have 1,000 kids, that's a lot of kids that are witnessing domestic violence. And if they're witnessing that, if anybody knew about it in a child protective service report, they're going to have that trauma as well. Hopefully some help and support with it, but it's always traumatizing when DSS has to get involved. The other thing, right? Our kids, they're facing multiple traumas. Think about our McKinney-Vento students. Being homeless or housing instability, typically it's not the only trauma they're facing. They also probably have some food scarcity, possibly mental health disorders in their parents, divorce, lack of a father in the picture, possibly some incarceration, substance abuse, no job. So just think about that our complex trauma with our kiddos is more than one trauma, and some that just go on and on and on. So the next thing we're going to talk about is why should the police, schools, and mental health care providers really care about trauma? There's a lot of reasons. We're not going to talk about all of them in here, but really we need to figure out why we all need to work together. And that's another reason why our collaboration is so phenomenal that we have in Mecklenburg County. We're only going to do a very little small snippet on trauma's impact on kids' brains, but we know it's there. We know by studies and studies and studies, especially since 1998, when the first ACEs study came out, and they do take CT and MRI scans of kiddos. And here you can see a 3-year-old, the normal student. Look at those temporal lobes and how lit up they are with activity. Our temporal lobes on our kiddos that have been abused, they don't have any of that activity. So we know, based on these brain views, that trauma can impair social, emotional, and cognitive development, weakens our kids' ability to regulate emotion and manage impulse control. So again, a lot of our kids you would have thought that might have been ADHD. They're just having responses to trauma. And then we know long term that it can disrupt development of organs, problems with our circulatory system, immune system, inflammatory responses, and it can then lead to many other bad things happening in our kids' lives as they grow up if we don't get in there and disrupt that trauma to help our kids build protective factors and resilience. And that's where we're here to help. I really love this kind of thought process in your brain when you're thinking about what does that look like on our kids. So it's like, going to age myself, like a needle on a record player. A complex trauma wears a groove in the brain. It's a reminder that the trauma can cause their bodies to replay their traumatic reaction, mobilizes them to either run from or fight from. Remember that flight, fight, or freeze. And then it can shut down other symptoms that really help them think and reason, and they can't think and reason. And that's what we see. Right? So we really want to think about what we can do to help kids. We need to make sure they feel safe. Sometimes they don't have a sense of safety in their skin or in their environment. We can help them with that in our schools. Sometimes they don't know how to have healthy attachments to others. We need to help them build those. We need to increase those SEL skills, increase those positive adult attachments. Sometimes, as we saw on the previous slide, kids don't know how to self-regulate. They've never been taught. They don't know how to understand their feelings and their emotions to be able to know what they're associated with and some of the tips and tricks they can do to start regulating. And sometimes our kids don't know how to act. They've never been told, or they have a baseline of how they are out in their homes and in the community, and they carry that over to the schools, but we need to show them and teach them and model for them what is the appropriate way to act and respond and to be able to identify your feelings. So when we think about healthcare, we do have a lot of pediatricians in the community that do ACE screenings now with their parents, with the kids that are coming in. But we know that that if we don't build the resiliency protective factors, then it can be linked to adult health and social problems. And this is across all studies. So you do have that historical trauma, social contentions. Those are a lot of the ones that we talked about, just that poverty, lack of housing, lack of emotional or lack of social movement, lack of food. And those can also lead then to some of those other adverse childhood experiences that we talked about with domestic violence, mental health, substance abuse in the homes, other types of abuse. And again, we saw from our picture of our brains that disrupted neurodevelopment. So then they have that social, emotional, and cognitive impairment where we have to intervene there and really start teaching our SEL skills. Because then what happens is the research shows that then our kids are starting to adopt risky behaviors, right? Staying out, you know, stealing cars, driving cars fast, drinking, sexual activity, behavior issues, and those will ultimately lead to disease, disability, and social problems if they're not handled and dealt with and addressed, which will also lead to early death. And we do see that in the research. So why should police be involved? Our police are out there, right? Our kiddos are the ones that are going to be seeing the police if they're engaging in some of those unhealthy behaviors, right? So they're the ones that are risky or are being seen. So police really need to know about trauma. And that's why we're really proud in Mecklenburg County to have those CDCP therapists that go out with our police officers to help them, as well as the CIT training that the majority of our police officers do get. It's not required in Mecklenburg County, but we do have a lot. All of our SROs are CIT trained, and we're hoping to increase that across all of our police departments. Why should school leaders know? Again, I love this graphic. Trauma turns off kids' learning switch. It turns it off. And again, we know from research over time that we do definitely see decreased reading ability, lower GPAs, more absences. Think about what some of these ACEs are and the trauma the kids are getting. It is going to result in higher school absences, which will increase dropouts. And then we are definitely seeing more suspensions and expulsions. And that's, again, these are the things we want to look at. Like, how can we help our kids that are exposed to trauma so they are coming to school, they are getting an education, and they're not getting in trouble and they're getting the support for their behavior. So those are the things we really want to address. And I'm going to show you some really good data on that. So again, traumatized kids see the world as a dangerous place. A lot of times including school, we have to make it safe. So again, many adopt that behavioral coping mechanism that can frustrate us and evoke exasperated reprisal from us, which is just going to increase their response back, right? We see that defiance, the withdrawal. And then the one that we don't talk about a lot too, but really causes a lot of issues with our kids is perfectionism. If they have these really, really, really strong helicopter parents, they're constantly making them feel less than because they're not being perfect in their classes. So then again, we've talked a lot about it happening daily, but it does happen daily. If you guys watch the news, we know it happens daily. So now I'm actually going to share some data from our first pilot year. I'm showing the pilot year because this school year we are working with accountability and we're revamping our dashboard, but I am going to show you the data because it really does hold true. And it's really eye-opening when I show you the data on what that looks like here in CMS for our pilot year. And unfortunately, this is not the complete pilot year. Our folks in accountability had some issues for our last month of that school year, but we had 14 schools in our pilot. We do have more than 14 schools shown here because we had a couple of notifications for students that the incident actually happened in the Freedom Division of CMPD, but the kids don't go to a school in that division because of some magnet schools. And I'll kind of mention that. So for that school year with 14 schools, we had 77 student notifications up until early May and 75 students identified. So that means at least one or possibly two kids actually had more than one notification. And then you can see West Mecklenburg had quite a few. Irwin had 9, but that was just actually one incident. It was a bus incident where the bus driver had a medical condition in the bus, and all the kids were traumatized by it. So some of these could be a couple kids, or they could be just one kid in a school, or they could be a family that have kids across different schools. So again, for almost a whole school year, if we would have done the rest of May and June, West Mecklenburg probably would have had the highest, maybe at about 20 or 21. But you guys will see that the lift of this program is not very intense. But I do want to show you some more demographics that really pinpoint why our kids need the support and why we need to know if they've been exposed to trauma where the police have been involved. Unfortunately, our Black students are disproportionately identified through this process, as you can see here with the 76%. And if you look over on the right side, our students with disability are statistically significant and overrepresented as well, with 25% of the notices of those kids being under the EC umbrella, where only about 10% of our students district-wide fall under that umbrella. And then when you look at grade levels, we really couldn't do a whole lot of more intensive search into why our 4th and our 9th grade were so high. And I think over time, I'd love to look into see if we do have a specific grade level, because then we can think about some prevention efforts and think about what's going on with those. When we look at academics, again, we can see by far, we do have 2022 and 2023 here because we did it just a couple schools just to kind of get us going. But in looking at the 2023-24 year, those kids that had a handle with care notice, you can see cumulatively, they only had 4.9 cumulative credits, where our kids that didn't have a notice had 10.2. Right, so they're not completing their classes, or they have too high of attendance issues to get credits for those classes. In looking at early warning indicators, we, not using that a whole lot, but we can see that our students that had notices overarchingly had higher warning risks. And then again, back to grades and thinking about GPA and Ds or Fs, you can see our unweighted GPA of our handle with care notices are a lot lower than those with notices, as well as the D and Fs with no notice. The average number of grades and Ds or Fs are a lot lower than those that got a handle with care notice. And then when we're looking at absenteeism and OSS, again, one of the things that we want to think about with our kids that experience trauma, like let's say on a Sunday night and are coming to school on Monday morning, we know they might not come to school because of what happened. And we can see that in our absences. You can see that average percent of days absent for our notices were 18 days in that school year, were only 10 with our kids that didn't get the notice. And then same thing with chronic absenteeism. You can see our kids that had notices, 55% were chronically absent, or 25% those without a notice. Again, we've got to get these kids back in school, even if they're experiencing trauma. And then for discipline, again, this number just amazes me that 39% of the kids that got those notices had at least one day of OSS, where without notices, only 9%. And these are some of the things that we really want to look at, again, when we are trying to address kids that have experienced trauma, and then not to traumatize them some more. So then I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint so we can see then what are some of the things that we can do. Again, in Mecklenburg County, these are the things that we're seeing and that we have documented. And again, we may never know what triggers the notice, and that's okay. We just know that that notice means that they could be traumatized where the police were involved, right? The police were involved. Some we may know about it because it might be in the news. The parent might call us. The kids might tell us. So we may know about some of them, but it's not imperative for us to know. And we're not going to ask unless they want to offer it up. And I'm going to give you some more examples. These could be car accidents, of course, domestic violence, shootings or witnesses to community violence. We did have a lot of shootings into houses, especially the year of the data that I showed you. Unfortunate deaths, drug ODs. We are working with a new department in Mecklenburg County where they're trying for overdoses to not to get the police involved, but to have clinicians involved. And we're trying to work with them so you would still get those notices even if the police weren't involved. Obviously, arrests, fire, and evictions. I mean, obviously, we see a lot of these. And again, some will be able to know because they'll tell us or we've seen it in the news, but some they won't, and that's okay. So really, what does it mean? So the next day in school, right? We want to make sure that if we get a handle with care notice in the morning, and again, doesn't matter what happened the night before, but are they here? Let's call and check on them, see if they need anything. Again, we're not going to call and say, hey, what happened last night? I see your student's not here. We'll say, hey, I noticed so-and-so's not here today. Is there anything we can help with? Or is there anything that's going on that we can help with? And then they might tell you what happened the night before. If they don't, that's fine. But are they hungry? Do we need to have snacks? Are they falling asleep in class? Do they need to take a little time out or go to the health room? Did they forget to bring their homework because goodness knows where their homework is? It was in a book bag and they got evicted. We don't want them to get in trouble, right? For that. It's not their fault. Are they staring off into space? Are they having an outburst? Again, with their response, if they experienced trauma the night before, they may have an outburst at you or some defiance, but let's handle it in a different way, right? Let's ask them, not what's wrong with you. What do you need? Let's talk about that. Let's get us calm down and let's kind of revisit this. Let's not just jump to discipline for them because we don't know what the underlying cause is. Right? So what we want our schools to be trauma sensitive. They need to be safe places where kids can build positive relationships with adults and peers and learn to manage their emotions and behavioral responses, and then come to school and find academic and social success. Right? So what is our solution? It is handle with care, and we can use it to help our kiddos. So our solution is this program that is really going to enable police to notify schools if they encounter a child at a traumatic scene. So schools and our mental health care leaders in our school can provide trauma-sensitive support right away to help our kids succeed. So we're going to end this part and have you do a discussion, and then we're going to move into the next part. Thanks so much, and we'll look forward to the next section with you.